All right. Thank you for joining us again here on Dream Home Ninjas 21.6, The Net, with Fire Marshal Lee Westrom, talking about fire prevention, fire safety. And we were just talking a little bit about the Great Chicago Fire and, the cow.
It was a horrific thing. I mean, when you think about everything back then was wood.
Oh, yeah. All the structures.
The streets, the sidewalks were all made of wood. The streets were full of straw because if it rained, there were no paved streets, so they would just throw straw and wood chips out there to stop the mud from being created.
Just keep it dry,
and just keep it dried up. And so not only were these buildings just lighting up, they had high winds that week. I mean, it was a perfect storm. All the planets aligned. And they said they even had witnesses back then saying how the streets would just light up because of the radiant heat was lighting up the wood chips and the sawdust, whatever they threw out in the street. So this is what people have to realize. This is what brings our houses to be burning so rapidly, so quick, is the radiant heat that our furniture is giving off gets to the ceiling and starts banking down. So now the ceiling could be 1,500 degrees, which means everything down at this level is taking that radiant heat and it'll just light up. Once it reaches its ignition temperature from the radiant heat banking down out of that smoke, everything in the room will light. And that's what happened at Chicago fires. Sidewalks were just lighting up. There was so much radiant heat from all this wood burning that everything was just spontaneously lighting up. A building next door would just light up because of the radiant heat hitting it, and the wind was pushing the radiant heat. You know how you stand by a campfire and you feel the heat coming off? That's radiant heat.
Right.
Multiply that 1,000 times, and that's what moves through your home. That's why things just light up when they reach their ignition temperature.
So you did mention when that was happening, there was another fire that happened in Wisconsin.
It was northern Wisconsin, and I wish I would have prepared for this one. It was a town that it burned. It was, I can't remember the cause of the fire now, but they had a lot more. I think there were like 380 people died in Chicago fire. I think there were like 1,000 people passed in that fire. It again was due to the dryness. They were in the middle of a huge drought down here as well as up there. Again, the building's made out of wood. It was a very highly dense area, and when it went fast. And the same thing as Chicago fire. It was a highly condensed area and a lot of people, and again, people weren't ready for it. They didn't expect it. People get complacent.
I was wondering if it was Kenosha with our flames going.
We're
traveling up.
Then they could have blamed us for it.
Right.
No, it was not anything to do with ours.
Right. That's just weird that it would happen on the same day.
It was very strange that those two horrific fires happened on the same night.
Well, back then, I mean, weather had a lot to do with conditions like that.
Absolutely.
So, I mean,
there was a huge
probably,
drought.
very sharing
Drought.
similar situations here.
Well, there was a year, I think it was the year before I started here, they canceled the fireworks because we were in the middle of a huge drought, and they set the fireworks up at Cerny Park, and everything surrounding Cerny Park was just open fields, and they were afraid of a massive grass fire getting off and getting to the townhomes over in off of Winfield Road. Yeah, there would have been nothing to stop it.
Right.
So they actually canceled the fireworks that year in a lot of towns because of the drought.
Yeah.
We've talked about it off the air. Unfortunately, all the fire codes that we address today and we use today have all been developed because of these disasters. So when you look at the Great Chicago Fire, building construction codes came out of that, and fireproof materials started coming out of that. Then all of a sudden you get to the 1920s, 30s, 40s, you have the Iroquois Theater fire where all the curtains in this massive theater downtown Chicago just lit up from a spotlight being too close. And they weren't fireproof. They have to be now. But those lit up, the flames hit the ceiling, banked across the ceiling, down the back wall, and blocked the people from getting out the exits. And 600 people died in that theater in Chicago, downtown Chicago that year. And so then you get to the 50s and you have Our Lady of Angels fire, where they lost 94 kids and 6 nuns.
Wow.
And there were no school codes back then. There were no building codes for schools back then. Now there's separations for hallways and stairwells. There's protected stairwells. Schools cannot use any flammable materials in their hallways. They'll hang up pictures from the kids and stuff, but all the building materials, all the carpeting, everything's non-flammable in schools. All these codes came because of all these disasters. So when I come in and I say the code book says this, people go, well, codes. But they came from disasters. And that's what people don't understand is I've seen them. I've read about them. I've done studies on them. In my college years, I did a study on Our Lady of Angels, and that was my thesis. And so I'm in touch with it, and most people aren't.
Right. And that's a huge point that you made there with the codes. Almost all codes came from a disaster, somebody getting hurt, somebody getting sick, deaths. Too many deaths, and people get upset about these codes, but it's very important to have them, and that's what's protecting.
It's for their protection. And
I mean, if they just thought about the fact that somebody's life paid for that code, they might whine a little bit less.
Yeah. Right. Carbon monoxide is a perfect example. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, you didn't have houses built the way they're being built today. They're so tight today with triple pane windows, and they're wrapped, and there's just no drafts in a house anymore. And what people don't understand is carbon monoxide detectors came because once houses became so tight, now they weren't breathing. Now they start a fire in their fireplace, and the natural draft, if you know the science of fire burns up and out. So the draft going up the chimney will pull. You won't feel it, but there'll be a negative pressure created in the house from that draft going up. There's got to be something to fulfill that exiting of gases.
Right.
And if there's no outside air, there's no makeup air made in those houses, furnace gases were being sucked into the house.
Yeah.
Your furnace is running in the other room because the rest of the house is nice and warm because of that. But the fireplace is actually creating the negative draft. And people were dying of carbon monoxide and had no reason why. They had no clue why.
Right.
And the building industry instantly figured this out. We've got contractors now, the HVAC guys all know that makeup air for these now new efficient furnaces and these tight homes are now in the codes to prevent that type of disaster from happening.
Right.
And if you want to know more about that, you can always check out either one of or both of our HVAC shows that we just
Absolutely.
did.
We just did 2 HVAC shows
we
talking about it. So
covered that pretty extensively, actually, because
So maybe you can help me. I know I was a fire inspector at the time, but you know what? About how many years we've had CO detectors in the code now? Does that go back to 2012?
It was actually 2005 or 6, I think, is when it really hit that we need to have carbon monoxide detectors in the house. So when it was mandated that we needed it. I have one more quick question about the history before we wrap this section up. Is even though we've had all these codes, we're still having major fires. So it made big things. Even we just talked about 10 years ago with Great White starting on the fire at a concert.
Yeah, a concert at that theater in New Jersey.
Right.
Great White gets up on stage. They're rocking it out. The place is packed to capacity. So now you're looking at exiting, making sure exits. 3 of the side exits were locked. 2 were open, but 3 were locked. So the majority of those people, when the fireworks actually went off and actually caught, they had foam wrapped throughout this whole stage area for acoustics.
Right.
And once that foam started on fire, again, it's like the cushions in our chairs. It's foam rubber. It burns at 1,200 degrees. It lit up instantly, and there's a huge fireball blowing over people's heads. Hundreds of people out in the floor.
Right.
And the fire was blowing right over their heads. And it happened that fast. And they all ran to where they came in, that front exit. When they went into fight flight, that's the way out. That's all they knew. Only a fraction of people even tried the side doors.
Wow.
And it's just, that's how people react. It's human behavior. You'll get experts across the country say this is how people react when they're thrust into an emergency. So that's why codes try to eliminate as much as they can because of some of these behaviors. And we kind of know some of these things are just going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
And mistakes happen and candles get knocked over and things do happen. So the more codes we have, the more compliance we have to those codes, the safer people will be.
Yeah, I think, like I said before, if everybody just kind of remembers, somebody's life paid for these lessons, that they are important, that we learn from them in the codes rather than from a new experience of somebody having to pay again for that that experience. But we're going to take a quick break on 21.6 The Net, Dream Home Ninjas, and we will be right back with Fire Marshal Lee Westrom. Keep wanting to say Lee Majors.
Lee Majors. This isn't Lee Majors, trust me.